I want to share the screen because I think this might be interesting here. Steph Sanchez, I had on the show the other day. She's got a 42-second clip on here about Shemar Stewart from her stream. I'm going to put this up and we'll play with this. I think she's got Josh Norris here. Yeah, she's got Josh Norris here. Let's listen to this real quick. This is 42 seconds on Shemar Stewart. I think there's an interesting revelation in this little soundbite.
Chris Kosirik, their defensive line coach, through the grapevine, and now this can be hit or miss, but this is just what I've heard. A massive fan of Shemar Stewart. Appreciates the traits, appreciates the upside, thinks he can work with the tools that are there to turn him into a finisher. Heck, that might even be ahead of someone like Micah Williams. I know Walter Nolan's name has been mentioned by Albert Breer and others as a possibility here as an interior rusher. But Dago, I think I might be leaning so we can get a real shakeup. And I understand that people hate when mock drafts become unpredictable. I'm going to lean Shemar Stewart here to give the 49ers. Chris Kos.
Very interesting. What do you think?
That doesn't surprise me though.
Because Josh Norris, by the way, you know Josh, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me because a lot of coaches, they have confidence in themselves, and Kosirik does too. And he would think to himself, look, I can develop him. And he's done that. I mean, guys like Arden Key have come here, and, Charles Omenihu was okay with Houston. All of a sudden, he's great with the 49ers. I mean, he has a history of being able to get the most out of guys. There's no question. It goes back to something John Lynch said to us yesterday, though, when we were down there at 49ers HQ, which is consensus. So does everybody want to take that risk? Does John Lynch want to take that risk? Does Kyle want to take that risk? Do the scouts want to take that risk? Like, how many ever people are in that room? And if John is reiterating consensus, it doesn't surprise me that a position coach wants to play with a piece of clay that has all the upside that Shemar Stewart has. But how risk adverse is John Lynch when it comes to a player like that versus a Mason Graham versus a Walter Nolan? And again, the
big question also is how much credibility does Chris's opinion?
Right.
Let's just say this. Let's take that at face value. Let's say this guy's contact is totally right. The guy's absolutely spot on. Norris has got a guy who knows he's right. Chris loves Shemar Stewart. What exactly, how much weight does that carry with John Lynch? Now, Chris did tell them last year, I want Evan Anderson after the draft, and had them invest almost $400,000 guaranteed money for an undrafted free agent. And he hit, because Evan Anderson is a very good NFL player in the present. And I think he's going to be someday somebody's going to pay him a lot of money. He's a good player. That was a great pickup. So the question is, does Chris is he hot with them right now? Do they feel like he's got, it'll be interesting to see, because maybe that alone would give him some significant sway. And maybe if Saleh also feels the same way and they're united on that front, you may see Shemar Stewart. But when it's interesting, if I was going to a presser, the one thing I would say is if I knew, John, I'm just thinking myself, psychological, if I'm John Lynch and I'm going to a presser, I know it's an exercise. I'm not supposed to tell the media anything. Right. But I got to say something.
It's a skill, though. He is good at it now.
I want to tell the media nothing, but I would definitely want to say, if I knew I was going Shemar Stewart at 11, I definitely would want to say something that was consistent with, what he is as what I like. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's like, well, wait a second. Yesterday, last week, John, you said you like short, fat guys, and you went for a tall, skinny guy. What? Yeah. Well, what did he say? He said, what do you like in a defensive end, John? I like guys who set the edge and pressure the quarterback. That's what he said. What does Shemar Stewart do really well? Set the edge at that weight, at that strength. He's the best at it. And that's what he does best, I should say. And pressure the quarterback, and he led A&M in pressures. And if Chris in the SEC, if Chris, is hot to trot on him, and that right there, that could be it. It could be Shemar Stewart at 11. I'm not even 100% sure Shemar Stewart makes it to 11, but there's a lot of Niner fans who are very, very nervous about this. But the question is this: if you like Shemar Stewart, do you also like Mason Graham? Or do you look at Mason Graham and say, short arms, college player, played next to Grant, like him, don't love him,
They're just so different. They're just really different. And look, I could see him taking Stewart. I could see Stewart not being there too. I could see a team like Jacksonville, who a lot of times at 5 is such a wild card, or Carolina, who is a bit of a wild card. Like, I could see those teams possibly taking him before, just because they cannot resist these things. But like I said, that's why teams fail in the first round. He's got production if you think production is hurries. He doesn't have sacks. Now, can you change those things? Yeah. Again, there have been guys who come into the league who aren't big sack guys who get coached by the right guys. It does not surprise me that Kocurek says that. It's just they've got to be united on the same front. And I really think you have you bring up a great point, because even though we didn't ask John Lynch this, and I guess if I had to do it over again, I would, and he would give us a generic answer that wouldn't tell us anything, because it's lying season, and he's become very good at saying something but saying nothing at all. But do you have to change your draft philosophy a little bit, in that if you're picking at 31 and you're stacked, you can take a risk on a guy. If you're picking an 11 and you better hit because you don't have anything on your defensive line right now, you better hit that guy. So do you have to hit a double rather than try to swing for the fences? Because Stewart is swinging for the fences. Graham, to me, is, by the way, I think Graham's a home run pick, but he's at least a double. And so do you have that mentality, or do you draft one way all the time, no matter what? Or do you adjust things to, hey, I need a starter badly?
How do you look at it? I mean, I'm biased because I've sat on the road with some of these guys, and I really believe in the wisdom of the guy who was in the stadium on the rainy day that the player actually played the game, as opposed and lived it and met, and was there and talked to people. So I always will lean with the scouts. But I'll say this, I'm also a huge believer in analytic data tied to the draft being absolutely a way to kind of almost moneyball it, to see through the minutia and get right to the players. I want guys who make tackles. You know what I mean? I want guys, whatever it is, and you can squeeze any variable in any formula you want and come up with something. But to me, when you wed the tape and the analytics, you're the best drafting team in football. So I think it's wise to listen to the analytics. And when I heard John say we like to build consensus, I think that's great. But it also, you got to leave room for Chris is coaching him,
right?
And he met him, and there's a connection there. And Chris thinks he can do this. And do we believe in Chris, or are we going to tell Chris, piss off? We're going to go draft somebody else, and you're going to take the guy we get you in the 3rd or 5th round. And then maybe Chris is like, not as fired up. There's dynamics at play here, but I would just say, take the best player, take a productive player. But it's interesting because some teams look at college production and say, Dane Brugler said it the other day. We had him on. He said, hey, look, the NFL draft and what the teams are looking for are traits. They're not necessarily looking for production, because it's a different game that they're projecting these guys into. So if you're looking for traits, Shemar Stewart. If you're looking for production, Mason Graham.
Well, I'll give you a great example, because I've always been a big believer in, well, if you didn't do it at the college level, how the hell are you going to do it at the NFL level? But I'll give you one of the biggest.
Daniil Hunter.
Yeah, he's a big one. But I was covering a game for ESPN Radio. It was Utah versus Wyoming, of all places, and they shipped me off to Laramie to do sidelines. And it is the wind.
You were there.
Yeah, and the wind is whipping like you can't even believe.
Yeah,
it's 50-mile-an-hour winds. I had to go up at halftime and just go, because it was unbelievable. And it's icy winds. It's freezing. And Josh Allen's the quarterback for Wyoming. So if I had never gone up there, look, he's completing like 47% of his passes. And I'm like, how the hell could an NFL team think to themselves, Josh Allen is our guy? But you don't realize that he played half his games in Laramie, Wyoming. Dude, I was screwing around on the sidelines. I threw a ball and it comes flying back at me. It was just the most ridiculous weather I'd ever seen in my life. So I thought to myself, before I saw Josh Allen up there, I looked at his numbers and I studied for the game, and I went, how could people be thinking this guy could be a first-round pick? And then I went to the conditions and I saw how he played, and he still tried to drive the ball down the field, and he had terrible receivers and he had a bad offensive line. And so, teams went up there and they took that into consideration. They take him in the draft. And I understood why Buffalo took him when they did. A lot of the draft analysts who had, of course, never been to Laramie, Wyoming and seen the brown and yellow, the fecal matter and urination colors of Wyoming in that War Memorial Stadium and that weather, they didn't realize it. And so I thought if I had just looked at Josh Allen's numbers, I'd have thought to myself, he can't play in the league. He never did it against bad competition in the WAC, let alone doing it at the NFL level. But I understood Buffalo. What kind of weather do you have? You have that kind of weather in Buffalo and worse with the snow and the things. And they said, you see this arm, he has experience throwing in it. We'll let him go slow. And it did. It took him a minute to kind of ramp it back up. And now we know what Josh Allen is. So from that point forward, I went, okay, I still believe in production in college. And I do believe the majority of players have to have some production or it might be tough in the NFL. But you have to look at every situation. And that's why the scouts are the scouts. Because I went there once and went, oh, I get it. Whereas scouts probably went there again and again and again in a place like Buffalo where the weather is such a factor. They went, this guy can cut through it because he's done it. And so all of a sudden, Josh Allen's great. Now, did I think Josh Allen was going to be that great? No. Because the day that they played Utah, they actually got beat and he was just okay. But between the weather and the players that he was playing with, I was like, he has garbage to play with. So I understood it when he got picked. I went, okay, this guy has a chance, even though in college his numbers weren't overly impressive.
Yeah. And from being there too, by the way, because I bet Wyoming quite a bit at home. That's a great home field.
That is because everybody goes up there. It's the middle of nowhere. Yeah. You have to go to an airport and drive a ton over there. It's just a brutal place. And to have, and they don't have a lot of weapons around them. I mean, obviously they don't. And so, you just have to take all those things into consideration because when you just look at something and you look at numbers or whatever, what somebody says, unless sometimes you understand the situation. So again, I don't know what Shemar's situation is, but it also depends, like you said, what do you consider production? Because you know this as well as anybody else. I'll give you a perfect example. Leonard Floyd had 8.5 sacks last year. Not bad. He played over 600 snaps. The other 600 snaps, I can tell you, I didn't watch every single one, but I watched a lot. He was shit. He was garbage. He couldn't set an edge. Well, he's 240 pounds. Nick
Bosa numbers had a ton of pressures last year, but he didn't have a lot of sacks.
So if you think Shemar Stewart, if you're Chris Kasarik, and I understand why, he says, well, I'd rather look at the 33 pressures rather than the 3 sacks and say, okay, how can I get him that extra half step? Or how can I get him to understand that you're reaching and trying to knock the ball out at that point? So he was in a position to make plays. He didn't finish the play. Well, Chris Kasarik is saying to himself, again, according to what you ran there, Josh Norris was saying, like, hey, you know what? I'm a great coach, and I'll get him that extra half step to make the play. That's probably what Kasarik is saying here, because 33 pressures, that's production, but we all get enamored with sacks. And I'm saying Leonard Floyd had 8.5 sacks. That's not bad, but he was trash on the other 600 plays that he played, and that's why he's not here anymore.
It's like I had a guy on from the Draft Network the other day, Josh, not Josh, I'm losing Ryan Fowler. Mm-hmm. And Ryan Fowler was there in Mobile. And he's like, I talked to him after the show. He's like, man, to be on the field and watch Shemar Stewart dominate in Mobile, it was something to behold. Now, this guy went there. He played on Monday at practice and Tuesday at practice and dominated at such a level that he shut it down the rest of the week. So you're not shutting it down if there's all these, people with all these concerns. You shut it down when they say, you know what, bro, you're going top half of the first round for sure. And that's probably what someone said to his agent. So for him to go potentially at 11 is not shocking to me. And to hear Josh Norris say that, because the question is, can Chris coach him up? Chris is the guy who's got to do it. If Chris really likes him, that's the key. And to hear that makes me think they're going Shemar.